What if you could go back in time and take video of any event in history? What would you record? And what do you think would happen if you brought that video back to show people? I've got an author I'd like you to meet whose book asks, what if there were no more secrets? What if that technology existed? Could we handle it? Stick around, because we're going to learn the answer to that question, more about his book and his writing process.
Welcome to A Book Finds You podcast. This week's guest is David Sloan. Join us as he shares the inspiration behind his book, along with his writing process, routines, and challenges. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, David Sloan, is a novelist from Baltimore, Maryland. He has a PhD in neuroscience, who by day works as a consultant in the healthcare industry. By night, amongst other things, he's a writer, and his book, Cameraman, is his second published novel. Happy to have you with us, so welcome to the show, David.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, you know, the show's called A Book Finds You, so we'll start there. And in case you haven't heard our show before, most authors that I speak to won't tell you that, I just woke up and here it was. It's sort of, we don't find it, it finds us. So what took you to this particular topic, which, by the way, I absolutely find fascinating?
Well, I'll tell you, when I initially came up with the idea, I was living in Morgantown, West Virginia. I was part of a writers group there. We were developing short stories to share with each other, and I had this fantasy, which I think is the ultimate millennial fantasy, which is, what if I could go back and record such and such a moment in history and then see what actually happened and eliminate all of the speculation and conjecture and conspiracy theories around that thing and just show it to people. And I thought that was a really cool idea. So I worked on this little short story and I called it Past Man. And I had this scenario where somebody just got a video from somebody who was going back in time and taking videos of the past. And after I wrote that story, I thought, oh, that's a really cool idea. I really like this. And I started coming up with other scenarios where that person was going back, taking video, bringing it back, what would happen, and developing the characters that were interacting with this mystery. And so I was fascinated by this idea, and then I had to come up with a reason for it and a mode for it and a way to bring it into the world. And that's what Cameraman turned into.
Good. Where I was beginning to obsess was I was thinking it's almost like a Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Although Twilight Zone, the one I saw in Twilight Zone, the camera was showing you pictures of the future. It wasn't going back to the past. And needless to say, that was screwing some people up. But it does have almost a Rod Serling-like feel to it, particularly when we think about the question that I asked when we started, which was, could we handle it? Could we sort of cherry pick the past, bring it forward, and handle it in a responsible manner? Does the book delve into that?
Absolutely. And I really had to tackle that question, not only from an ethical standpoint, but I also had to introduce a character who actually was using the technology and explain why he was choosing to use that technology in the way that he was, instead of all of the different great and terrible scenarios that we can think of if we had that technology.
Yeah. Huh. All right. So there you are with this idea. I wake up with ideas too. I usually in the middle of the night wake up and go, what a great idea. Write it down in the morning. And I look at it and go, not quite as great idea as I thought. But how do you know when it's worth pursuing? Because, it's kind of an out there idea and there it is. It lands on you. It finds you. But a lot of us have moments like that, but we don't necessarily carry them through. How did you know this was the one that you really wanted to sit down and nest with?
I think my experience as a novelist has always been, when I write a short story first, I have a sense and an instinct that this thing has legs, and I can see that there's a narrative that I could string out of the initial idea. But the initial idea is always what draws me to a project, and it's what draws me into most books that I read. It's like, is there something really cool about it? And then I just have to invent an infrastructure around that idea that will allow it to breathe and grow. And so I worked on it for a long time, but the only way that I could really get it to grow was if I brought things in from other sources as well and created kind of a rope of narratives that I could weave together that could actually carry it through and make it not just an interesting idea, but a compelling and satisfying narrative that would carry you through all the way to an end. And that took some time. That took me a long time to do.
Yeah. It's interesting. As you were speaking, I was thinking, I think I know from my perspective. It's when the idea just won't leave you alone, you know?
Yeah,
In other words, we get a lot of ideas that go, that's pretty good. And in a day or two, we go, well, maybe not. But every now and then, one just won't leave. It just says,
I
sorry,
think so.
I'm not done yet. And I think that kind of gives us at least the clue that we're looking for. Because from my perspective, and I don't talk about the titles or anything in my books, but it's been since 2018. And I got publishers, I got people that want me to write another book. But recently I had that moment, and it's been a month now, and I can't shake it, which is really good. And so I'm outlining it, and I'm there. But I think that's the difference, because I can tell you I had other ideas,
Yeah.
but your brain will tell you, it'll go, yeah, that's good for now. No,
Yeah, your brain will tell you what's a good seed of an idea or not. There's
yeah.
actually a theme in the book of Cameraman. There's a character who is a genius, but he's also crazy. He thinks he's an alien and he invents his own language. And he invents a language around ideas in physics. And so he invents a word called gripcha. And gripcha is a word that basically means a source of gravity, but you use it in a way that it's not just a source of gravity in space like a black hole, but a source of gravity for people or a source of gravity for thoughts. Anything that pulls your mind or pulls a person or pulls a series of events towards a center. And the idea of Gripcha evolves in the story and it becomes a theme for all of the different characters because they all have to deal with their Gripchas. So when we're writing, this is a common thing, exactly what you're describing. There is a kernel of a center of gravity that starts to arc your thoughts towards it that then becomes irresistible and that you just want to ride as a
Right,
wave.
right. And ride that wave. Absolutely. Uh, Curious, particularly in the types of books that you write, do you begin with the end in mind? I mean, do you have a sense of where it's going to end and then kind of build your path to it, or do you let it just sort of take you there?
I let it sort of take me there. I am very bad at seeing the end from the beginning,
Hmm.
which is why all my things start as short stories that are mostly the first chapters of my book or like the fifth chapter of my book. And then I have to discover how that type of narrative would end as I go. So it becomes an exploration. It's very much a scientific process where I start with a hypothesis
Hmm.
and then I conduct an experiment as I write the book. And I take out what doesn't work and I eliminate kind of the bad responses. And then I keep what works and I try and follow the truth of where the story would ultimately lead me.
Somebody would say you sound almost like a neuroscientist.
That's exactly right.
Welcome to this man's other world, kind of seeping in and going, wait, we want in too. Do you have a writing routine that you follow? Let's climb into your routine a little bit.
Mhm.
Is there, a time of day? What does that look like for you?
Finding a time of day for me is very difficult. I have a lot of things that are on my plate. I have a
Hmm.
full-time job. I've got a family. I've got all kinds of stuff going on. So I write when I can. I look forward to things like Christmas break because, I have 3 or 4 days where I don't have to work, where I can just sit down and do it. A lot of times I'm up early, 5 or 6 in the morning, and trying to type out a chapter. What's really helpful for me is that I married an English teacher, and all of my children, I have 4 kids, all of my children are also very interested in writing and storytelling. So I'm in a household where they're very supportive of literature attainment and trying to get books out, and they're all very excited about the idea of writing. They're all writing themselves. So I live with a very supportive community.
Boy, you sure do. Uh, but I want to keep poking at that a little bit because, we get people that are listening. And what I'm always hoping is they're grabbing little kind of kernels from authors like you. And I think one of the dangers that people who dream of writing a book but don't do it is they can't find the time. I'll wait till there's a good time to do it. And so Me, for instance, I don't write at a particular time or things like that. Life gets in the way.
Mhm.
But as I'm following this kernel, once that outline's done, I'm going to give myself a word count weekly. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll get there in 2 days, and sometimes it'll take me six and a half. And I'm trying to manage that week around my day job as well. Do you have any type of when you're really going? If we're talking about this
Yeah.
existing book, but if another one smacks you in the head again, uh, do you give yourself kind of a word count or a page count, or you just let it be organic?
I try to go by chapters. I'm actually dealing with this now
Hmm.
because I'm writing another book now, and I've been, writing other things for the last couple of years, and I try and sit down and say, I just have to get this nugget done. There's a next scene or a next character arc or there's some task that needs to be done. And as long as I can just sit down and execute my will to put it on the page and to force myself to find a time and to push aside other priorities just for a minute or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, then I can get it done and I can just do it one nugget at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, see, for me, it's always been, I don't travel as much, but I've got about 3 million miles in the air. So I'm a guy who's in airplanes a lot. And I see you gesturing.
Yeah,
He knows. There's, a wonderful moment where you really can nest up there. I'm one of the most friendly guys you ever meet, except when I'm on a plane. And it's not that I'm mean, it's that I don't want to talk because it's one of the few times where I'm sort of sequestered and I can really write. And I know what I'm writing well before we get to 10,000 feet and we can put our tray tables down. I've been thinking about it for 3 days.
that's right.
So, but it's things like that that you have to find your own little cave, your own way of doing it. It's tough.
It is very tough and it can be a very frustrating experience because when you really want to write it, it's not just that you have to get the project done. It's that the urge to write is so strong that it frustrates you when other priorities like life get in the way. It's like, oh man, I can't believe I have to work and earn money for a living when all I really want to do is just sit down and write about, this guy on a camera. And that can be very frustrating and it takes a certain amount of willpower and acceptance of the juggling that you have to do as someone with creative ideas to be able to handle that responsibly as an adult, to not let too much interfere with what you have to do to survive or to actually do important things that you have to do, but to still eventually fulfill that creative ambition. It takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of flexibility for you to manage your time in that way.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to come from a different angle with you.
All
Have
right.
you ever abandoned a project? In other words, you're in, and I don't mean, abandon it during the outline. That's
Mhm.
that's easy. But where you really said, I think I got it. I see it. I'm there. And, maybe you've got a chapter done. You've got some momentum. It's important for people who are listening. Really, sometimes you just have to push yourself down the hill. It's
That's right.
to get that first chapter going because you do create momentum. But my question to you is, have you ever abandoned that kind of project?
I have a couple of
Hmm.
times, but the reasons for that abandonment vary. I'll give you an example. So when I was writing Cameraman, I created this mystery of who the cameraman was, but I had to have a satisfying explanation of how somebody could actually theoretically, feasibly develop that technology. And if I didn't come up with that in a satisfying way, then the book would be meaningless. And so, separately from that, at the same time, I had this idea for a Batman TV show. And this was, before a lot of the Batman stuff had come out that we've seen recently. And I was like, I was really interested in the idea of Arkham Asylum, where all the bad guys live and they're all together and they're all interacting with each other. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to see a TV show? And so I actually sat down and started writing it. And then I very quickly realized that, Warner Brothers isn't calling me anytime soon to ask me about Batman. So I thought, well, forget Batman as IP. I want to just develop these ideas that make that idea interesting into my own thing. So then I started writing a novel based on that I called Beneath the Door. It was about a different type of psychiatric facility where different super geniuses would come together. And I got the idea for Cameraman about the same time, and then eventually I realized I could take everything I liked about Beneath the Dura and repurpose it for Cameraman, and suddenly I had the explanation for how the Cameraman technology was created. And I had the solution to the entire mystery. And that totally changed the trajectory of my book. So even as thought I had a good idea that lived on its own, it was actually much better subsumed into this other narrative. And that's what I was able to weave together so that I could get to the ending that I wanted.
Yeah, which is really smart, David, because I think people have a tendency to sort of lock down a little bit on
Mm.
an outline. We go through, if we're playing our cards right, we go through expansion and then we go through some contraction. But I remember even when I was working at Xerox and teaching quality improvement, and we teach a multi-step way to problem solve and brainstorm, and that's it. And we contract and we're down. And there's always the question of, well, what if I come up with an idea when all that's done? And somebody will typically shout out, tough, too late. We've moved, you're not allowed to have an idea now. And if you can kind of hear how ludicrous that is of,
Right.
well, listen, it's not a straitjacket, it's a guide. And I would have loved to have come up with it earlier, but that's the beauty of writing, David, which I'm sure you've experienced, which is some of the best parts of that book, and I haven't read it yet, are probably the ones that weren't quite in the outline, but as you were going, that's when it started to materialize. So outlines are great. It's like we're creating a path, to walk, but we're allowed to move around on that path a little bit.
That's right. I mean, and again, that's the scientific method.
Mm,
So most scientists, when they're trying to learn about something, they say, oh, I want to learn about this star or this plant or this germ. They start off with that hypothesis. They have an outline of where they think it's going to go.
mm,
But the facts of life reveal themselves as discovery as part of the experimental process. And sometimes it leads to a place that you don't really expect, or sometimes you discover principles or, you know, organisms or things that you didn't know were there that totally change the narrative. And you have to be humble enough to accept those facts and to reorient your mind in the way you are seeing the universe so that you can accept that and then pursue a new course. Otherwise, you get a lot of bad science. So it's part of life, it's part of science, it's part of writing in equal measure.
yeah. And so I think the point we're both making is I don't fear it, welcome it. It's
Ah,
part of the process. Because I think our instinct is to fear it a little bit of hold it, I've come too far. I don't know if I can really deviate. Let's not be afraid of it. Let's explore it a little bit.
that's right.
And that's what you do. And it's interesting because with your background, having never met you, I would think you'd be programmed the other way of really trying to stay more scientific and, within the petri dish, so to speak, you know. And yet, I guess this is that other side of you that gets to really explore and play a little bit as a writer.
Well, discovery is the joy.
Yeah.
For in many endeavors, discovery is the joy. And so if all I was ever doing was saying, I'm going to write this, this, and this, I'm going to set it out, I'm going to organize it, that would be extremely boring. And I would not be motivated as a writer if that were the way that it works, because I would have already seen the entire story in my head. And by the time I got to the end, I'd be done and I wouldn't be interested in trying to find anything else.
Yeah.
Nor would the reader, because the reader would have felt that the entire story was just thrust upon them and in whatever format that the author had inside their head. This happens with artists all the time, where an author or another type of artist, a movie director, will have a story in their head and will say, I need to hit these beats, and I'm going to force those beats in no matter what. And the reader or the viewer will experience that forced placement,
Yeah.
and they will feel like they've been dragged somewhere unnatural. And so the process of discovery is important for the writer, not just to keep the writer motivated, but also to infuse the writing with a type of natural evolution that they would expect as part of their real world experience, and that they will enjoy also as somebody who's looking for discovery.
Boy. Spoken like a true writer, I got to tell you. That's so well articulated. I appreciate that. And I hope people are listening. understand that. That's one of the reasons why I love this show, to hear moments like that, because it's a lonely journey and it's a little bit scary when you haven't done it yet. And yet, just hearing authors talk about the joy of exploration, not to fear it, is just invaluable. Let's get to the publishing side with you a little bit.
Mm.
But what's your path to publishing? That's another fear people have. What if I write it, I don't publish it?
So, Cameraman was an interesting journey. So, my first novel, Brackets, I was my proof of principle, and I published that on Amazon. I self-published, and I did the typical thing where I told my friends and family, and I distributed copies, and I went to book fairs, that kind of thing. With Cameraman, I wanted to play around with it. I looked at, traditional routes, but when I initially published it, there wasn't a clear path for me. It was a little long for my genre. It wasn't something that traditional agents were really looking to pick up. And it's a really hard book to explain when you get into the nitty-gritty. So what I did instead was I went the pay by chapter route. I went on Kindle Vella and I actually published it first almost as a serial. Kindle Vella is now a defunct system, but at the time it was a really nice entry point so that people could read the first three chapters and then pay as they go. And that turned out to be very successful for me because once you got into the story, people really wanted to know what happened. And it was a long enough book that it took a long time for them to get there and they had to pay out in order to find out. And at the same time, I also developed a series of YouTube shorts where I was actually giving that I called the Cameraman lectures that are still online if anyone wants to see them. But I wanted to express and talk about the ideas that are embedded in the book, like Gripsha that I talked about earlier. And I put those online as another way of telling the story. And then I put it on Amazon. It's there now. And you can buy it as a traditional book or an ebook. Um, I'm actually working on a project now, which is totally different. And where I'm building a website and I'm actually experimenting with different modes of world building using the website as a foundation and trying to bring in different aspects of this world that I'm trying to build through traditional novel writing and expand it in a way that is unique and that tries to push the edge of what storytelling and publishing really entail. So I've been playing around with a lot of different ideas and I'm very interested in exploring some unique pathways for actually getting somebody's story and ideas out there.
Yeah, well, you're certainly a guy who thinks out of the box. Did anybody take the place of, usually when we lose, and I had not, I'm pretty well versed on the publishing world, hadn't heard of, what was it,
Kindle
Kindlewella?
Vella. There are a few websites like this. I think it started in Canada as an idea.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it thrived for a while. I don't know that it's gotten as much traction as I would have hoped because it's a really nice way of getting young authors out there and getting them to lower the threshold so that somebody doesn't have to buy a $15 book if all they want to do is just see if it's any good.
Right.
So I'm hoping that there are other avenues like that that become available for young authors that help them to get enough of an audience so that they can actually become more attractive to agents and publishers and to develop a following in a way that's not such a grind, that there's more of a farm team for writers than there are nowadays.
Yeah. Do you have an ebook on this?
Yep. Cameraman's available as ebook
Okay.
as well.
Is it an audio book?
Not yet, but I would love it to be.
Yeah. Uh, how about, it's sort of what you were describing. Sometimes there's really interesting technology that's really good, but it just, for some reason, just doesn't land on the public the way we want it to. And an example of that is an enhanced ebook. Have you ever heard of an enhanced ebook?
I have an idea of what you mean, but go explain it more.
It's an ebook with, at one point, it was very controlled exactly how much. I think it's 24 minutes of video
Mm.
inside the ebook, sprinkled in any way you want. And so thus the enhanced. But, if a typical ebook is on Amazon, let's say, marked down to 9.99, an enhanced ebook will be 11.99. But for certain writers, it's really a kind of a cool thing to be able to show you a couple of things. I mean, I know I could write another chapter on this, but how about I just let you see how this conversation would evolve, or look at some of the places that we've, that I'm connecting this story to. It doesn't fit for every book, but to me, it's a great technology that seems to be going absolutely nowhere. One of my books is enhanced, and it barely, people just don't know about it. So,
Yeah, but I think there's opportunity for something like that to hit. I mean, if you think about the
yeah,
technology of the book itself, it hasn't changed since Gutenberg, right? Just a compilation of pages with words on them, and that's it. And then the ebook comes out that makes it more accessible, but by this time we have enough experience with video and with movies and different modes of storytelling, virtual reality. I'm very interested in the virtual reality space. And we have enough experience with that kind of thing that we should be thinking outside the box on how we immerse our readers into these ideas and these stories and these worlds that we're building. And we shouldn't be limited to what we can put in some set, which works really well. It's been around so long because it works. But at some point, I think there will be mediums that will come out like that will eventually get hold and be just the right balance of interactivity and traditional storytelling and modern elements to make it perfect for the modern consumer.
yeah, it's sure taken a long time, David. I completely agree with you. And the reason why I don't know the specs now, but I knew them when I was engaged with it, is because they want to make it so that you don't have to change devices or anything. They're not loading it down with a massive file. It has to be in a certain format so it fits in. But our devices are ready for it. It's just for whatever reason. Um, as a guy who teaches sales, it's not a sales problem; it's a marketing problem.
Right.
Because it's no brainer. Maybe one other problem, and here I'll ask you this question. I'll release it in a second. Is if I were to give an author 24 minutes of video,
Uh,
what would you do with it? And I'm going to give you an example. When I was shown it, I was not impressed. It was an author, a very popular author, whose now name I will not give because I wasn't impressed with it,
yeah.
but someone that most people know. And the person was just sort of sitting on the side of a desk talking more about the chapter that you'd just written. And I'm thinking, well, just write that in the chapter. I'm talking about things that really need to be seen.
Right.
And so my question for you is, let's just play with this for a second. If you were going to do an enhanced ebook,
Hmm.
what would, there's precious minutes. Give me an example of maybe a thought, and I'm putting you on the spot, but that might be really interesting visually as opposed to just reading the words you put down.
So if I were to do this specifically for Cameraman, we'll use that
Yeah,
as it.
yeah, yeah.
So a theme of the book, as we talked about, is the ethical implications of being able to see what actually happens. And we have tons of examples in uh, in our media today where we're actually witnessing something authentic that happens because there was a camera present. Like take the CEO killer that just happened. Everybody in the world saw that guy commit that crime because there was a camera present. And there are lots of different types of examples of when that happens and what the impacts are. Think about George Floyd. Think about
Mm,
other examples
yeah,
where politicians have been caught on camera. So if I were to do an enhanced ebook, what I would really want is to bring that concept home and connect what was happening in the fictional narrative to real life, would be to do a compilation of videos of things like that where a cameraman was present and it changed the world, and to connect what's actually happened in the world with multiple cameras on all the time with how that's impacting our daily life, and to think about, to the original question, what would we go back and try and fill in the gaps for, and what would we go back to try and supplement so that we're not speculating on history as a matter of course.
yeah,
So I would try and weave in some of that reality.
yeah. I knew you could handle that question. Good job. But you didn't know that one was coming. Uh, all right. I could keep firing questions away at you. I'm really enjoying the conversation. Let's
Hey, it's the
start.
it's the power of discovery, man. It's
Yeah,
that's what we're
yeah.
doing. It's what we're doing.
Well, remember what we were talking about. Sometimes our best ideas are when kind of they're fresh and we get pushed into an angle we didn't know we were going to get pushed into.
That's right.
Uh, so, bringing it in for a landing, we've got some aspiring writers listening. What advice would you give them? A good aspiring writer who's been on that fence of thinking about it, thinking about it.
I would say you have to accept how much work it's going to be. And once you come to terms with how much work it's going to be and how patient you have to be in order to actually get that done and to be able to continue, as I said, living real life in a way that is responsible, you can do anything. So when I was a kid, I would go every week to weed this old lady's flower bed. And every day I went over there and she saw how many weeds I had to pull out. She would say, "Remember, you can eat an elephant if you do it one bite at a time." And that's always stuck with me as a mantra in the back of my head. It's like, all right, I'm trying to eat an elephant. It's okay. Do it one bite at a time. And as long as you do that, and as long as you put in 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, as long as you're putting something on paper, eventually, by the immutable laws of time and space, eventually something's going to get put down. And then once you get your rhythm, it'll be enjoyable. But write because you love the idea and you love the process. And as long as you're doing that one bite at a time, then it won't be frustrating and you'll be able to do great.
Perfect. I was sitting here going, oh boy, I'm going to have to do damage control with this. It's a much bigger project than you think. But that's why we wait for the answer to be finished,
That's
which
right.
is, yeah, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. And to remind ourselves that, I don't know about you, but the first chapter or two seem like they take forever.
Mhm.
But once I've got some words in the bank, it's funny how fast the rest of the words start coming, and that's that momentum piece. So
Right.
I happen to love elephants, so while we're eating that very large mammal, just remind yourself that it gets easier, and that's just what we heard from David. So I appreciate that. I think it sounds like a great book. I don't accept books from authors when they interest me. I go out and get them, and I do that because I want to be able to put a review on there and a verified review. So Cameraman's got me intrigued, mainly because of the conversation. So I really appreciate it, David. How do people get a hold of you?
The best way is to reach out on Bluesky. I've just changed over to Bluesky, so at Tangle Maple Dawn. And I also have a website up called tanglemapledawn.com. This is for my new project that I'm working on. It's a very different thing from Cameraman, but a lot of my author stuff is on there. I'm just starting to boot up this new project. So if you want to see what I'm doing now, that's the best way. Hit me up there.
So let me make sure I got that right. All one word: Tangle Maple Dawn,
Yeah,
just the way it sounds.
DAWN. Yep,
Got it. Okay. Hey, that program you were talking about that's still online where they see pieces of what you've written,
on
is
Kindle
that on
Vella.
that website?
I'm not there anymore, but
Okay.
and I believe I just got a note that that website is going out of business.
Okay. All right.
So don't go to Kindle Vella looking for me, but if you want to explore it while it lasts, go ahead. But
Okay.
otherwise, you can find my books on Amazon in the traditional way.
Fantastic. And when you find them, make sure you write a review of them on it, everybody. David, thank you so much. Really a pleasure. I took a couple notes myself over here, and I'm looking forward to getting my eyes on Cameraman. So thanks so much for being on the show. Really, truly appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. I loved it.
Good. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's guest author, we'd love you to rate, review, and share this episode with others. If you'd like more information on today's guest or the Maryland Writers Association, please visit our website at marylandwriters.org. You can also find out about the history of the Maryland Writers Association by listening to our first podcast, Episode 0.